The summer Naomi Harper turned 8. The air in Willow Creek felt so thick you could drink it. Heat pressed down on the little town from morning to night, sticking to roofs and roads and skin, until even the cicadas sounded tired when they buzzed in the trees. Naomi's house sat on a low rise at the edge of town, a small, worn, white wooden place with peeling paint and a front porch that sagged in the middle. Her father, Henry, liked to say the house creaked because it had lived long enough to have opinions. Her mother, Leela, liked to say that anyone who complained about the creaks was welcome to sleep outside and see how they liked the snakes. Down the hill, closer to the slow mud-brown river, stood the Caldwell place. Its porch leaned even farther than the Harpers'. Its roof had been patched with 3 different kinds of shingles, and the fence out front was a suggestion rather than a structure. The Caldwell yard always seemed full of something: laundry, cousins, noise, or arguments. People in Willow Creek said the Harpers and the Caldwells had been on bad terms, so long that even their chickens refused to wander into each other's yards. It hadn't always been that way. Years before Naomi and Ruth were born, Leela Harper and Lorraine Caldwell had actually sat in the same schoolroom. 2 skinny girls with braids and knees scabbed from falling on the same dirt. They'd shared pencils, whispered during spelling tests, even giggled over the same singers on the radio. But childhood friendships sometimes break along fault lines grown-ups carve. When they were in their 20s, a small piece of land came up for sale on the edge of town, a flat, decent plot near the highway, the kind of land you could build a rental house on, the kind of land that meant 1 extra check a month between drowning and barely floating. Both couples wanted it. Henry and Leela went to the bank together. Lorraine's husband, Ro, went too. He went late. He went after he spent an afternoon at the juke joint and showed up smelling like beer. The bank manager shook his hand, then looked at his shirt, his eyes, his paperwork, and frowned. "I'm afraid we've already approved a loan for the Harpers," he said. "We can't extend that much credit twice on the same block. Maybe next time, if you've got more collateral." When word got back to Lorraine that the Harpers had landed the land, the friendship snapped like a dry twig. "You knew we wanted that land," she hissed at Leela one hot afternoon in the churchyard, her voice carrying through the oak trees. "I knew you wanted it," Leela shot back, apron still tied from setting up for the potluck. "Wanting and working ain't the same thing. Henry's been pulling extra shifts for a year to make this happen. Ro's been pulling extra beer." A few of the old women nearby gasped. The pastor's wife pretended to fend herself harder so she could listen more closely. "You cheated us," Lorraine said. "You ran to the bank behind our backs." "The bank was open to the public, last I checked," Leela replied. "You could have gone first. Your man didn't." "That's not on me." From that day on, every little thing turned into proof for Lorraine. Proof that the Harpers thought they were better, that they got what they wanted, that the world lined up to hand them opportunities, while the Caldwells watched from the sidelines. She didn't keep those thoughts to herself. "Remember this, Ruth," Lorraine said years later as she and her daughter hung laundry on a sagging clothesline. Ruth was 8 then, lanky and sharp-eyed. "People smile in your face and take your plate the second you look away. Harper folks are the worst of it. Don't you ever forget." On that same day, up the hill, Leela was talking to Naomi. "You stay away from the Caldwells' mess," she said, snapping beans at the kitchen table. "They're mad at the world. I don't need their anger rubbing off on you." "Is Ruth mean?" Naomi asked. "She's a little girl being fed grown folks' grudges," Leela answered. "That's worse than mean. That's poisoned." Naomi didn't fully understand the history or the words. She only understood the way her mother's mouth tightened when she saw Lorraine at the grocery store, the way Lorraine's eyes narrowed when the Harpers drove by in their rattling pickup. By the time Naomi and Ruth met in Miss Evans' 2nd grade classroom, the space between them was already crowded with old arguments they hadn't been alive to hear. Naomi watched people and listened more than she talked. She liked the feel of a book in her hands and the quiet of early mornings on the porch. She helped Leela cook, helped Henry hold board steady when he built things in the yard, helped count coins for bills at the end of every month. Ruth liked nose. She liked games in the dirt, liked racing bows down the street and winning, liked making up stories so wild other kids had no choice but to believe them or call her a liar and fight about it. She had quick hands and quicker words, and she hated being told no. They noticed each other first as shapes on opposite ends of their world. Naomi with her tidy notebooks, Ruth with her scraped knees and loud laugh. They didn't clash properly until the church potluck when they were 10. Children ran around the yard between tables piled with food. Women shouted warnings about dresses and stains that went mostly ignored. Men gathered near the grill to talk about work and weather. Naomi sat on the steps with a paper plate of potato salad balanced carefully on her lap. The dress she wore had been Lila's once, light blue with white flowers, washed so many times it looked soft as breath. Lila had stayed up late hemming it to Naomi's size. "Hold it close," she'd warned that morning. "I don't have time to get barbecue sauce out of lace." Across the yard, Ruth and two cousins were daring each other to climb the old pecan tree. "I bet you can't get to the second branch," one cousin teased. "I bet you can mind your business," Ruth shot back, already jumping, fingers catching bark. The boys started tossing a football. It wasn't much of a ball anymore, more dirt than leather, but it flew just fine. Marcus, all elbows and enthusiasm, threw it too hard. It sailed over his friend's head and bounced, hitting Naomi's plate and sending potato salad across her dress in a pale, wet smear. "Oh, man," Marcus yelped, running over. "Naomi, I'm sorry. I'm real sorry." Naomi looked down at the stain, at the white flecks soaking into blue. Her throat burned. Lila was going to be so disappointed. "It's okay," she said, because that was what she heard her mother say to rude customers. "You didn't mean to." From a few feet away, Ruth froze on the tree trunk. She saw the stain, saw Marcus' guilty face, saw Naomi's attempt at a smile. "You just gonna let him do that?" Ruth called. Naomi blinked. "It was an accident. That's what people say when they don't want to fix what they broke," Ruth replied. She dropped from the tree, dust puffing up around her sneakers, and walked closer. "If that was my dress, I'd make him scrub it with his own tears." "It don't come out with tears," Naomi muttered. "It barely comes out with soap." "Then he should bring you another dress," Ruth insisted, glaring at Marcus. "Hey, I said sorry," Marcus protested. "You saying sorry doesn't clean nothing," Ruth snapped. "Ruth," Lorraine called sharply from the table, hearing her daughter's tone. "Get over here and stop making a scene. She's just saying what everybody thinks," one of the older ladies murmured, loud enough for Lila to hear. Lila's jaw tightened. "My girl said she's fine," she said. "We raise her to know the difference between an accident and an attack. An attack is when you steal land from a man who needs it more." Lorraine shot back. Voices rose. People shifted. Naomi felt suddenly like the whole thing, her dress, the ball, the stain, had grown into something bigger than her. She stood up carefully, set her plate aside, and slipped away around the side of the church, tears finally spilling over. Behind the building, as she wiped her dress with a wad of napkins, she heard footsteps. Ruth appeared, breath a little fast from running. "Here," she said, handing over a bottle of water, cold. "Might help." Naomi hesitated, then took it. "Thanks." "You shouldn't let them walk all over you," Ruth said. "You say it's okay, and they think it is. Then they do it again." "Yelling won't fix the dress," Naomi said quietly. "It'll fix your spine," Ruth replied. She wasn't smiling. For a moment, Naomi saw past the louder, rougher edges. She saw a girl who knew too well what it felt like to be stepped on and had decided to grow claws instead of scars. "Maybe you don't have to fight every time," Naomi said. "Maybe you just fight when it matters." "How do you decide when it matters?" Ruth challenged. Naomi didn't know. She didn't have an answer. So she unscrewed the cap, poured water on the stain, and they watched it spread and dilute. "Now it looks like a cloud," Ruth said. "Ugly one, but still." Naomi almost smiled. Then their mother's voices cut through from the front of the church, barbed and bitter. And whatever chance that small moment might have had shrank under the weight of old grudges. Years passed. The girls grew taller, their voices dropped or smoothed, their teeth straightened or didn't. The town stayed mostly the same, roads patched, stores opening and closing. New gossip layered over old. Naomi's father died when she was 9, on a rain-slick road outside Montgomery, when a drunk driver crossed a line that existed only in paint. The funeral strained the little church to its seams. Men shifted in their boots. Women dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Naomi sat beside Lila in the front row, hands folded so tightly her knuckles hurt. She stared at the casket and listened as the pastor talked about God's mysterious plans. Ruth sat in the back with Lorraine, swinging one foot in nervous circles. Lorraine had insisted they go. "Even if I think that man stole from us, death is death," she had said. "We show our faces. God keeps his own scorecard." After the service, in the churchyard, people lined up to offer condolences. Lila received them with a distant nod. as if they were waves breaking on a rock shed decided not to move for. Lorraine approached, Ruth at her side. "I'm sorry for your loss," Lorraine said. Her voice was tight but not mocking. "No woman should have to bury her husband so young." Naomi looked up, surprised. Leela blinked, some of the hardness in her eyes softening. "Thank you," she replied quietly. For an instant, the air between the women felt almost thin, like something could pass through it without getting caught on barbs. Then someone called Lila's name, and the moment scattered like dust. Naomi and Ruth's eyes met briefly over their mother's shoulders. Naomi saw something in Ruth's gaze she hadn't seen before. Not contempt, not sharp amusement, but a flicker of recognition. "Maybe we're not as different as they tell us," Naomi thought. She opened her mouth, but whatever words she might have chosen drowned in the murmur of the crowd. By high school, Naomi and Ruth were old enough to understand more of the stories they'd grown up hearing. Naomi understood that her mother resented the Caldwells' accusations, but also carried her own guilt, like a hidden stone guilt that maybe, just maybe, they had beaten the Caldwells to that land not only because of hard work, but because luck sat heavier in their corner that week. Ruth understood that her mother's anger at the Harpers was as much about Roy leaving as it was about land and loans. It was easier for Lorraine to point at Lila's house on the hill than at the empty spot where her husband should have been sitting at the table. They also understood more about each other, though they'd never admit it. In 10th grade, Mrs. Coleman paired them for a history project. The classroom murmured as if someone had just dropped a match in dry grass. "You will work together, Mrs. Coleman said firmly, hands clasped. "You don't have to braid each other's hair, but you do have to finish this project without killing each other. That's the assignment." They met at the library, because neutral ground felt safer than either of their houses. Naomi brought a notebook full of neat outlines. Ruth brought colored markers and a head full of ideas. "What if we do a timeline like a road?" Ruth suggested, spreading out poster board. "We can draw it like a path, with turns at important events." "That's actually smart," Naomi said, surprised. "You sound surprised," Ruth retorted, arching an eyebrow. "Well," Naomi said, "you spend a lot of time picking fights." "Didn't know you could pick fonts too," Ruth snorted. "I can do both." They worked together for 3 afternoons, arguing over which events mattered most and laughing unexpectedly. When Naomi imitated the history teacher's voice, "You missed your calling," Ruth said on the second day. "You should have been an actress." "Some of us don't have time for stage lights," Naomi replied, though she smiled. On the third day, as they walked out of the library into the fading light, they paused at the top of the steps. "You know," Ruth said, "if our mamas weren't," she gestured vaguely, "like that, we might been friends." Naomi looked at the sky, streaked pink and purple. "We don't have to be like them," she said. Ruth considered that, then shook her head slightly. "You say that like it's easy." "It's not," Naomi admitted, "but maybe it's possible." They stood there a moment longer, the door closing behind them, the air between them fragile and uncharted. Then a car drove by Lorraine's pickup and Ruth saw her mother's narrow eyes in the driver's seat. "Ruth," Lorraine shouted out the window. "You coming, or you moving in with them Harpers too?" Ruth's jaw clenched. The moment popped like a bubble. "See," she said bitterly, "the world don't want us all on the same side." She jogged down the steps, slamming the truck door harder than necessary. Naomi watched them drive off, that thin new possibility trailing behind the exhaust. Ruth's temper found other battlegrounds. She and Shanice had been friends since middle school. They shared cigarettes behind the gin and secrets in whispered tones, who kissed whom, which teachers were meanest, which dreams felt too big to say out loud. When Elijah Turner came back to town, Shanice noticed him first. "Lord," Shanice said, watching him walk into the diner one evening, "who is that fine man?" "Elijah," Ruth said, balancing plates. "Used to live here. Went off. Came back. He looking good now," Shanice said, eyes following him. "You gonna make a move?" "Maybe I already did," Ruth said, tossing her head. "Has been talking to me at the gas station." Shanice grinned. "Well, don't take too long. Men like that don't stay on shelves." They joked about him. At first about his dimples, his 2 big hands, his habit of saying mum to old ladies and making them blush. Then Shanice noticed something else. "I've seen him with Naomi," she said one night as they closed the diner, wiping down tables. "He walks her home sometimes." Ruth's hands stilled. "He walks a lot of people places," she said. "Has helpful. That's his thing." "Shanice hummed. "He doesn't look at a lot of people the way he looks at her." Meaning, Ruth snapped. Meaning he got that soft-eyed look when she talks, Shanice said. Like he listening with his whole face. Ruth slammed the rag down. You always got something to say about Naomi, don't you? Shanice blinked. Curl. In just telling you what I see. Don't bite my head off. You want him yourself, is that it? Ruth demanded. You'd love to see me lose out to people at once, wouldn't you? Naomi up the hill, you down the street. Ho. Shanice held up her hands. Where is that coming from? It's coming from watching you smile extra wide at him when he orders coffee, Ruth said. From hearing you talk about how good he looks. You think I don't notice when my own friend circles what I want. I want you to be careful, Shanice said, her voice sharpening. That's what I want. You latch on so hard, Ruth. You act like every maybe it's a promise, and then you crush yourself when it doesn't work out. Ruth's cheeks flushed. So now I'm pathetic. I didn't say that, Shanice replied. But you chase things like you chasing justice through your mama. And sometimes the things you chase ain't yours to catch. I knew it, Ruth spat. You sound just like them. Like Naomi. Like Leela. Be grateful. Be quiet. Accept what gets handed to you. That's not what I. Ruth stepped forward, eyes blazing. You don't want me to fight for anything. You want me to stay bitter and broke and alone so you can feel better about your little life. Shanice's jaw clenched. You need to stop putting your mama's hurt on everybody else. Don't talk about my mama, Ruth hissed. Somebody needs to, Shanice shot back. She filled your head with hate and called it wisdom. And now you don't know how to want anything without burning it down. The words hit something deep. Ruth didn't think, she acted. Her hand flew out, shoving Shanice's shoulder. It wasn't a hard shove, but Shanice stumbled, then shoved back. Don't touch me, Shanice snapped. They were both tired, raw, full of unsaid things. The argument escalated, voices rising. You ain't better than me just because you can see the problem, Ruth shouted. You're still standing in the same mud, at least in not throwing it at everyone, Shanice retorted. Ruth's fist tightened around the rack. It felt like the only thing keeping her from swinging. The cook poked his head out from the back. You two need to take it outside or take it down, he barked. We closing up, not hosting a boxing match. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Fine, Shanice said. You know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to talk sense into you. You want to ruin your life chasing after people who don't want you. Be my guest. Just don't drag me with you. She grabbed her bag and walked out, the bell over the door jingling sharply. Ruth stood in the empty diner, chest heaving, feeling like someone had taken a shovel to her foundation. It struck her then that she hadn't just lost a possible man, she'd lost a real friend. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself Elijah would be worth it. She was wrong on both counts. The wedding of Elijah and Naomi, when it came, felt to the town like some strange mix of prophecy and inevitability. They fit, the old ladies in church said, nodding, like pieces finally finding where they supposed to go. Harper Girl and Turner Bow, the men at the barbershop remarked. Makes sense, both stubborn, both decent. To Ruth and Lorraine, it felt like watching a door close on something they'd been pushing against for years. On the morning of the wedding, Leela stood in the cramped church kitchen, fussing over trays of food and trying not to cry. If I cry too much, my head's gonna explode, she told one of the ladies. It'll ruin all the pictures. Might improve em, the lady joked. You always said you got too serious a face. A little swelling might soften it. Leela swatted at her with a dish towel, laughing despite herself. Lorraine, invited out of politeness, but determined to stay on the edges of things, hovered near the back pew. Her dress was old but pressed. Her mouth was set in a line. During a lull, the two women found themselves alone in the hallway near the bathroom. Voices from the sanctuary muffled. You gonna glare the whole time? Leela asked without turning. You gonna pretend this ain't you winning again? Lorraine replied. Leela sighed. Lorraine, nobody's keeping score but you. That's what winners always say. Lorraine snapped. You got the land. You got the husband who stayed longer. Now your daughter got the man my girl wanted. You gonna tell me that's coincidence? I'm gonna tell you life's messy, Leela said. And half the time, people get things they don't deserve, good and bad. You think you deserve this? Lorraine demanded. You think your girl earned him more than mine? This ain't about earning, Leela shot back. This is about who he chose. You mad at the wrong people. Lorraine's eyes flashed. My girl has been walking in your girl's shadow since they were little. You think I don't see it? You think she don't? She's been walking in your hurt, not my shadow, Leela said quietly. You could have put that down a long time ago. You don't get to tell me what to carry, Lorraine snarled. They stared at each other, two women held up by equal parts pride and fatigue. You could still let it go, Leela said, voice softer. For Ruth. So she ain't 80 years old still chewing on the same old bone. Lorraine's jaw worked. For a second, her eyes shimmered with something like doubt. Then she shook her head. That bone is all we got, she said, and walked away. Leela watched her go and thought of Naomi, of the life she hoped her daughter would have, not one free of pain. She was too realistic for that, the one not chained to the same old angers. She had no idea what kind of pain was headed their way. The story of the accident and its aftermath never stopped being told in Willow Creek. People whispered it with pity, with outrage, with judgment, with shaky attempts at comfort. They said, little Imani was just walking home from school when she got caught in that old wire. They said, it was bound to happen. That law was a death trap. Town shoulda cleared it years ago. They said, Ruth was with her. She screamed for help. Must've been awful. They said, later, Ruth led her there. I heard it from James, who heard it from Ruth herself. She led that baby like a lamb to slaughter. They said a lot of things. What they didn't see was the private war that raged between Leela and Lorraine in the weeks after the accident. The first time they met in the hospital corridor, Leela was coming back from the vending machine with a cup of coffee she didn't even want. Lorraine was arriving with a casserole dish and a hesitant look, dragged by some remnant of decency or curiosity. They stopped 3 feet apart. I heard, Lorraine said, about the girl. That she's blind, Leela said flatly. Silence yawned open. I'm sorry, Lorraine offered. That shoulda never happened. No. Leela agreed. It shouldn't have. Their eyes locked, the weight of yours pressing in. My girl was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, Lorraine said. Same as yours. Is that what she told you? Leela asked. That's what the police said, Lorraine retorted. Old wire. Old lot. Bad luck. Leela took a slow breath. You know what my girl told me? She said. Nothing. She hasn't said a hateful word about Ruth. Not one. But I know my daughter. I know when she's holding something back to spare me. She always did act like some kind of saint, Lorraine muttered. That's you talking about yourself, Leela replied. Not her. You think my Ruth wanted that child hurt? Lorraine demanded. You think she woke up and said, I'm gonna ruin a little girl today? I think you've been feeding her your anger since she was big enough to listen, Leela said. And anger goes places you don't plan. It spills. It stains. Lorraine's face twisted. You blaming me now? I'm blaming us all, Leela said. You. Me. The men who made promises and broke them. The town that let that lot rot. But if you asking if I think Ruth had something to do with my grandbaby's eyes being gone, then yes, I do. I think she carried your grudge into that field. Lorraine's breath hitched. For a moment, raw hurt showed through the crust of resentment. You always thought you were better than me, she whispered. It ain't about better, Leela answered. It's about choices. You keep telling your girl the Harpers took everything from her, and now she's taken something from us so big we can't even name it proper. Lorraine's eyes filled. She turned away abruptly, clutching the casserole like a shield. I ain't talking to you no more, she said, voice shaking. You think whatever you gotta think to sleep at night. You'll never sleep, Leela said, too softly for her to hear as she walked off. Not really. When the rumor of Ruth's confession finally broke through the town's surface, it hit Leela and Naomi like a second wave of the same wreck. Naomi, standing at the sink, washing dishes, heard the words from a neighbor whose voice trembled with the thrill and horror of sharing such news. They say she told James in the bar, the neighbor said. Said she knew about the lot. Said she took Imani there. Said she just wanted you to hurt. Like that makes it better. Naomi dried her hands slowly, each movement deliberate. Thank you for telling me, she said. She didn't slam anything. She didn't scream. She just stood there for a long time after the neighbor left, staring at the faucet, listening to the drip. Leela walked in, saw her daughter's face, and knew. She told. Leela asked. Naomi nodded once. Coat, Leela said, sitting heavily. At least now we know which direction to aim our prayers. That's supposed to make me feel better, Naomi asked, voice brittle. No, Leela answered, but it might make our anger stop running around like a chicken with its head cut off. They sat in silence. Do you think God will forgive her? Naomi asked finally. That's his business, Leela said, My business is whether we let what she did turn us into something else. Naomi looked at her mother. What if I wanted to? Leela met her gaze steadily. Then you go find out how much darker you can get before you scared of your own reflection, she said. And when you done, it'll still be here, praying God drags you back. Naomi swallowed. That's not much of a warning. Not in the warning business, Leela said. I raised you and I know what you're capable of business. That night, after Naomi and Elijah returned from the lake with something hard and quiet in their eyes, Leela didn't ask what exactly had happened. She looked at Naomi's face and at Ruth's the next Sunday at church and understood enough. And she asked Naomi later, when they were alone. And I stood on an edge and stepped back, Naomi said. Not because I wanted to. Because I didn't want Imani to be afraid of my hands. That's the only reason, Leela probed. Naomi considered. It's the main one, she admitted. The other is I didn't want to be like them, the ones who hurt first and then talk about fairness later. Leela nodded slowly. That's the fight, she said. Not with them, with yourself. Yours folded over the town like pages in a book, bending but not tearing the story. Leela had a small stroke in the kitchen one morning. Naomi heard the crash of a pot and found her mother on the floor, face slack on one side, hand twitching. Mama, she breathed. Kneeling. Lila's eyes were sharp, even as her mouth refused to form words properly. Naomi called an ambulance. Elijah came rushing home. They rode to the hospital, that too familiar corridor swallowing them again. Recovery was slow. Lila's speech came back in bits. Her right hand stayed weaker, her steps more shuffling. Tired of this body, she muttered one afternoon, struggling with a fork. If it was a car, I'd trade it in. You're not a car, Naomi said, guiding her mother's fingers around the handle. You're the driver. Feels like the car's driving me, Leela grumbled. Naomi took on more care, more bills, more worries. The weight felt relentless. When she lay awake at night, she sometimes thought of the lake again and wondered what it would have felt like to let go, to give in to that dark impulse. Each time, she rolled over and listened to her daughter's breathing in the next room, to her mother's occasional cough down the hall, and knew why she hadn't. Across town, Lorraine's body deteriorated faster. Years of smoking and bitterness caught up. On the day she couldn't catch her breath long enough to curse, Ruth dragged her to the clinic, hands shaking. The doctor listened to her lungs, looked at the chart, and didn't say anything Ruth didn't already know in her bones. You can make her comfortable, he said. Low. But her heart and lungs are very tired. They're not gonna bounce back. Lorraine lay in a narrow bed at home, oxygen hissing softly. You listen to me, she rasped, grabbing Ruth's wrist. Don't you go crawling to them Harpers, when gone. Don't you give them the satisfaction of your tears. Ruth swallowed. I won't crawl to anyone, she said. I barely stand as it is. Good. Lorraine muttered. Stand mad. That's what keeps you upright. Tired of being mad, Ruth whispered, more to herself than to her mother. What's that? Lorraine wheezed. Nothing, Mama, Ruth said, smoothing the blanket. When Lorraine finally died, Ruth stood by the grave with a face carved into something that didn't crack. 2 cousins, a neighbor, and the pastor were the only other ones there. Afterward, the pastor laid a hand on her shoulder. You holding too much alone, he said. That's how it's always been, Ruth replied. Don't know how to do it any other way. You could learn, he suggested. She almost laughed. Some lessons come too late. Imani left for the city at 19 with a suitcase that had more braille labels than clothes, and a heart full of fear and hope in equal measure. Naomi and Elijah drove her to the bus station. Naomi's hand on Imani's arm the whole time, as if she could anchor her that way. You call, Naomi said for the 5th time. You text. You send smoke signals. If one day goes by and I don't hear your voice, in driving up there and dragging you home by your ear. Yes, Mom, Imani said, smiling. I'll send GPS pins at every sidewalk crack. Elijah hugged her so tightly she had to tap his arm twice to breathe. You remember, he murmured. You got more light in you than any city's got lights on the outside. I'll try not to get a big head about it, she replied. On the bus, she sat by the window, feeling the vibrations of the engine through the seat. She couldn't see the town receding, but she could feel it slipping away, familiar sounds fading, unfamiliar ones building. Naomi stood on the platform lawn after the bus disappeared, staring at the road. Feels like my heart just got on wheels, she said. It's gotta drive itself someday, Elijah answered, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Back in Willow Creek, Ruth heard about Imani leaving from whispers at the clinic and murmurs at church. Naomi letting that girl go out there blind. One woman clucked, braver than IDB. Girls got more sense than half the folks with two good eyes. Another argued, she'll manage. Ruth imagined Imani navigating a bigger city, Cain tapping out new paths, and felt a strange mixture of pride and dread. One evening, months later, when Imani returned for a visit, Ruth found herself in the church sanctuary during a rehearsal. She hadn't planned it. She'd come to drop off cleaning supplies and heard the piano. The music drew her in like a tide. Imani sat at the old upright piano near the front, fingers moving with certainty over chip keys. The melody was something in between a hymn and a blues song, full of ache and stubborn hope. Ruth slipped into the back pew, invisible in the dim light. She listened, throat tight. When the song ended, Imani rested her hands in her lap for a moment. Then she spoke, not turning. "You know I can hear you breathing, right?" she said. Ruth froze. "I know it's you." Imani continued. "You wear that citrus cleaner stuff, and you breathe like the air's heavier for you than for other people." Ruth stood up slowly, heart pounding. Her first instinct was to flee. Instead, she walked down the aisle, each step sounding too loud in her own ears. "Hey, baby," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," Imani said. "I was just playing for the walls." There was no anger in her voice. There was no warmth either. Just a calm that made Ruth feel more unsteady. "How's the city?" Ruth asked, grasping for small talk. "Treating you right?" "It's loud," Imani said, "but loud can be good. Means there's life." Ruth swallowed. "Good, good." Silence stretched. "Why are you here?" Imani asked. Not accusing, merely direct. "I clean in the evenings," Ruth said. "Taster lets me practice not bumping into pews when nobody's looking." "That's not all I meant," Imani said. Ruth's hands twisted together. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I thought if I heard you play, it'd do something. Make it quieter in my head." "It doesn't, but it's beautiful." "Guilt doesn't like music," Imani said softly. "It wants the room to itself." Ruth flinched. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't even forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm still here. Still carrying it." "I know," Imani said. "Every time I walk down that street, I know. Every time my cane hits a crack in the sidewalk, I know. I don't need your presence to remind me." Ruth closed her eyes. "Is there anything I can ever do?" she asked. "Anything at all that would fix it?" Imani finished. "No." That word landed like a hammer. "But there's something you can stop doing," Imani added. Ruth opened her eyes. "What?" "Stop hiding from places where people can see you," Imani said. "You made a choice out in the open, in the daylight. You don't get to spend the rest of your life only existing in corners and shadows. That's the easy way out." "You think it's easy?" Ruth whispered. "No," Imani answered. "I think it's easier than looking people in the face when they know who you are." Ruth let out a shaky breath. "You sound like your mother," she said. "I sound like myself," Imani replied. "My mama sounds like herself. Sometimes those selves agree." Ruth nodded, tears burning. "I am sorry," she said. "I know," Imani answered. "I also know that sorry and sight don't live in the same house." She turned back to the piano. "You can sit," she said, "or you can go. Either way, I'm gonna keep playing." Ruth sat in the second pew, not as far back, hands resting on her knees. She listened as Imani played a song that sounded like rain over broken things. For the first time, Ruth let the music move through her without trying to use it to drown out the memories. She let it hurt. In the end, there was no neat moral wrapped around the story of the Harpers and the Caldwells, of Naomi and Ruth, of Leila and Lorraine, Elijah and Imani. There were only people, carrying what they had been given and what they had taken. Stumbling forward, Leila died in her sleep one autumn morning, her Bible open on her lap. Naomi found her with a peaceful look on her face and tear salt dry at the corners of her eyes, as if she'd been arguing with God until the very end and finally run out of words. At the funeral, Ruth stood in the back, head bowed. Naomi saw her as she greeted people afterward. Their eyes met and held. They did not speak. Lorraine's grave, a few rows over, had weeds around it. No one tended it regularly. Ruth did when she could, pulling grass, brushing dirt from the stone with rough fingers. Sometimes, standing between the two graves, she thought about what their mothers might be saying to each other. Wherever souls went after the body quit. "You see what happened?" Lorraine might say. All that forgiveness talk, and your girls still hurt like mine. And your anger, Leela might reply, jumped generations and broke someone who didn't deserve it. You think yours didn't? Lorraine would snap. You think your choices never hurt nobody? Of course they did. Leela would say. Difference is, I wanted mine to stop with me. You wanted yours to spread. In the living world, their daughters kept walking. Naomi got older. Lines deepened on her face. Her hands, once quick and sure, grew slower with age. She watched Imani build a life that held both the weight of what had happened and a stubborn refusal to be defined by it. She still sometimes woke at night, heart pounding, dreaming of wire and choices she almost made. Those nights, she'd get up, sit at the kitchen table, and breathe until the past loosened its grip enough for her to stand up again. Ruth aged too. Her body ached in all the places that had been working since she was too young. Her house stayed small. Her bank account stayed thin. Her guilt stayed. But something else grew beside it, something like acceptance. Not of what she'd done. She never excused that. Acceptance that this was her life now. One marked by a choice she could never undo. In a town that would never fully forget. Among people who might not hello but would always know. She showed up anyway. In the store. In the church. At the clinic. She let them see her. Sometimes, in the grocery aisle, she and Naomi passed each other. They nodded. A fraction deeper than courtesy demanded. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. It was something like acknowledgement. Two women who had walked through the same fire from different sides and survived. Each burnt in her own way. The lot where the accident happened was finally cleared. The town hauled away the rusted wire and old trash. Someone planted grass. For a while, kids weren't allowed to play there at all. Over the years, rules softened. Games returned. Don't run too fast, mothers warned. Watch where you step. You know what happened here. The kids, who hadn't been alive then, nodded with wide eyes. The story became a cautionary tale, a way to keep children from danger. What happened? New kids asked. Once, the older one said, a little girl came through here with eyes like stars. She left without them. Why'd? Because somebody's hate found a way to reach her, they answered, even though it wasn't meant for her. Sometimes, by the lake, you could see Naomi and Elijah walking along the shore, not getting into boats, but watching the water. They carried blankets and thermoses and sometimes sat with Imani, listening to the lap of waves. You still think about that day? Imani asked her mother once, their hands linked. Yes, Naomi said. Less than before, but yes. You regret not pushing her? Imani asked. Naomi was quiet a long time. Some nights, when I'm so tired of hurting, I feel hollow. I wonder what it would have felt like, she said finally, to let myself be that kind of person, to give in. And, Imani pressed gently. And then I look at you, Naomi said. I think about how you hold my hand, how you touch my face when you talk to me, how you trust me. I think about the day you sat in that boat with us and said you'd hear it every time I touched you. If I did. She squeezed Imani's fingers. I regret a lot of things, she said, but I don't regret stepping back. They sat there in companionable silence, listening to the water. Farther down the path, Ruth sometimes walked alone, keeping her distance but sharing the same view. If someone had asked her what the story of her life was, she might have said, it's a story about jealousy, and about what happens when you feed it more than you feed your better self. It's about how you can aim your hurt at one person and hit another who never did you wrong. It's about how some consequences stick harder than any punishment a court could give you. If someone had asked Naomi, she might have said, it's a story about how the world can take from you in ways you never imagined, and how you keep going anyway. It's about lines inside yourself you hope you never cross and the days you come close. It's about how justice and revenge are not the same, even when they wear the same shoes. If someone had asked Imani, she might have said, it's a story about learning to move through the dark and realizing most people are stumbling, even the ones with eyes. It's about carrying other people's mistakes without letting them crush you. It's about finding music where you thought there was only silence. If someone had asked Ruth and Naomi and Leela and Lorraine's ghosts all together, the answer would have been longer, messier, full of contradictions. But the simplest, truest piece at the center of all their tangled lives was this. Hate, once given a direction, rarely stops where you intend it overshoots. It ricochets. It scars bystanders, and if you don't decide, somewhere, sometime, to put it down, it will use your hands to do things you wouldn't recognize yourself for in the daylight.